Before marriage, the boy promised his girlfriend he'd fulfill all her unreasonable demands, including not having children after they wed. But 6 years into their marriage, Cian began to have second thoughts. His desire to become a father grew stronger by the day. That very night, Cian dreamt of a pig charging into his arms. He immediately got up to search for a dream interpretation book. His wife Hayami, hearing the commotion, followed him. After asking, she discovered her husband was deciphering a dream. Hayami countered, "That might be a pregnancy dream." Cian was taken aback by his wife's explanation. After all, since she'd chosen a child-free life, pregnancy was impossible. So the next morning, after a hurried goodbye to his wife, Cian rushed to his car, pulled out the phone he'd hidden, and excitedly told his mistress about last night's pregnancy dream. He quickly stashed the phone away after the call. The pregnancy dream had lifted Cian's spirits immensely. Meanwhile, her father-in-law had also experienced a pregnancy dream the previous night. Her mother-in-law excitedly called her daughter-in-law to share the joyous news. Recounting their pregnancy dreams in detail, she hoped Hayami would go to the hospital for a checkup that day. Hayami immediately dismissed her in-laws' speculation. There was no chance she would change her mind about having children. Her words inevitably disappointed her mother-in-law, as the elderly couple had longed for a grandchild for 6 years. Moreover, their son was their only child. Ever since Cian married, the couple had felt profoundly lonely. Now, the dog they kept at home was their sole source of companionship. Most distressing of all was the vast fortune the father-in-law possessed, yet no grandson to inherit it. Thus, the next day, the mother-in-law visited again to persuade her daughter-in-law. She expressed how much she and her husband adored children. "And your couple's genes are so excellent," she added. "They should have more children to bring greater happiness to the family." But Hayami remained adamant about not having children. To silence her mother-in-law, she handed her some fruit, hoping to change the subject. Yet the elderly woman persisted, chattering on in her attempts to change her daughter-in-law's mind. Faced with her mother-in-law's pleas, Hayami had long since tuned them out. She couldn't possibly sacrifice her career just to have a child. Besides, her husband's love for her was always so deep and unwavering. Her phone held no hidden secrets. Yet Hayami didn't realize she was only seeing the surface. Cian had long wanted to end this marriage quickly. He confided his desire for divorce to his mother, pleading with her to persuade his father to agree. That day, Hayami accidentally stumbled upon her husband's car in the garage. Excited, she stepped forward to greet him, only to see him holding an unfamiliar phone, deep in conversation. After speaking, Cian swiftly hid inside the car. This series of actions enraged Hayami. So her husband had been secretly keeping another phone all along? Cian was equally startled the moment he saw his wife. He hadn't expected Hayami to leave work half an hour early today. Hayami didn't want to waste words with him. She stormed into the car searching for the phone. Furious, she demanded to know what this meant. Cian had no explanation, but his nervousness tipped Hayami off. She decided to check the phone's messages herself. An unfamiliar number appeared before her eyes. Hayami slapped her husband hard across the face in fury. Cian refused to reveal the other person's identity throughout the entire incident. He offered only an apology, no further explanation, because Cian knew his wife's temperament. If she found out about that woman's details, she'd make it known to everyone. Hayami went berserk, beating Cian mercilessly, until his nose bled profusely before she stopped. But Cian insisted on going to the bathroom to clean his nose, because he wanted to protect the people he cared about. He pulled out the SIM card and destroyed all the information inside. How could Hayami possibly let him off so easily? That very night, she stormed into her in-laws' house in a rage, and immediately accused their son of having a woman on the side. At first, the mother-in-law didn't believe her daughter-in-law's one-sided account, but the father-in-law insisted on calling his son back to get to the bottom of it. Knowing her husband's hot temper, the mother-in-law secretly grabbed the family golf club and hurriedly told the maid to hide it. After being summoned back by his parents, Cian couldn't avoid a scolding. His father even picked up the shoe on his foot, ready to strike. His mother, worried her son would get hurt, stepped in to stop her husband. Now the entire family was curious about this woman who had made him reveal her address. Faced with his wife and parents' questions, Cian refused to give a direct answer. Left with no choice, his father ordered him to immediately apologize to Hayami, and vow to completely sever ties with the other woman. But Cian felt his marriage to his wife had reached its end. All decisions were now in Hayami's hands. Beyond apologizing to her, he had nothing more to say. Hayami confronted him. Do you regret divorcing me? Under intense pressure from his parents, Sean was forced to kneel before his wife and apologize. Yet he still refused to salvage this marriage with no future, since their bond had already fractured. There was no point in remaining bound together to inflict mutual suffering. Seeing her husband resolutely propose divorce, Hayami shed tears of heartbreak, though her in-laws had never been entirely satisfied with their daughter-in-law. Divorce was an unheard of disgrace in their family lineage. Thus, they desperately tried to dissuade their son from ending the marriage, even threatening him to return to the family. Sean simply said I'm sorry to his parents before leaving. This incident completely severed the ties between him and his wife. Sean was even thrown onto the sofa to sleep by his wife. Hayami was intensely curious about what kind of woman he was with. If he agreed to this, she would sign the divorce papers immediately. After all, there was nothing left to hold on to with a man whose heart had wandered. But Sean refused to meet his wife's demand. He knew Hayami's temperament wouldn't let this go easily. The next day, the mother-in-law sought out her daughter-in-law again, urging her to quickly conceive a child with Sean. She believed having a child would make Sean settle down, but Hayami felt Seon's heart was no longer with her. Even a child might not keep him tied down. The mother-in-law thought Hayami was too overbearing with Seon. She shouldn't resort to violence over minor issues. He was a man and deserved some dignity. Even if she divorced him, she might not find a partner as excellent as Seon. No matter how much her mother-in-law pleaded, Hayami remained convinced that a cheating man was unforgivable. Yet her mother-in-law's words eventually began to wear on Hayami. This time, Seon stubbornly refused to yield. He'd slept on the sofa for a week and seemed to have grown accustomed to it. The more Hayami thought about it, the more furious she grew. She resolved to teach him a lesson. Fuming, she filled a basin with cold water, intending to splash it in Seon's face. But after a few seconds of hesitation, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Her husband's infidelity had left Hayami so distraught and irritable that she accidentally messed up her lines at work. Making such a basic mistake filled her with guilt. To vent her pent-up anger, Hayami took it out on her husband. She stormed into the bedroom for no reason and beat him up. Seon couldn't endure his wife's violence any longer. He could only beg his father to agree to his divorce from Hayami, revealing that the girl he loved was already 5 weeks pregnant. He held up the ultrasound photo for his parents to see. Just a year ago, Hayami had despised the flab on her husband's belly. She forced him to hit the gym daily to sculpt his physique. Unwilling to have a partner who looked like a greasy middle-aged man, Seon had no choice but to join the gym. The moment he walked in, he spotted Jaewon working out. Instantly, Seon found her curvaceous figure irresistibly sexy. He couldn't help but stare at Jaewon a few extra times. Back home, Seon threw himself into intense workouts. His mind kept flashing back to Jaewon at the gym. When Seon spotted Jaewon in the gym elevator, he approached her for the first time to strike up a conversation. After his workout, he encountered Jaewon again in the break room. Seeing the lunchbox Jaewon had personally brought left Seon somewhat astonished. Even the tea she drank was from her own home supply. In that moment, Seon found Jaewon both disciplined and devoted. Having skipped lunch, Seon headed to the basement cafeteria, only to receive a call from his wife urging him to eat less. Seon quickly suggested his wife make him a lunchbox next time, but his proposal was met with her scolding. Hayami declared she'd never set foot in the kitchen. The next day, after his workout, Seon encountered Jaewon again in the cafeteria. This time, Jaewon had brought another lunchbox complete with her own homemade sauce. Seon was intrigued by her sauce. He struck up a conversation again, asking for the recipe. Jaewon noticed the wedding ring on Seon's finger. Curious, she inquired if his wife hadn't packed him a lunch. Seon could only explain his wife was busy with work. Out of politeness, Jaewon shared half her sauce with Seon. Seon accepted without hesitation and joined her at the table. After tasting her lunch, he praised it as incredibly refreshing. Their first conversation seemed to click effortlessly. Seon asked for Jaewon's number under the pretext of wanting the sauce recipe. Through chatting, they discovered they were actually 10 years apart in age. It turned out Jaewon was already 42, but Seon thought she looked remarkably well preserved. Over the meal, Seon grew quite fond of Jaewon's personality. He found her not only kind-hearted but also gentle in her words and actions. Just then, Hayami suddenly called, anxiously reporting a pus-filled boil had appeared on her mouth. Urged by his wife, Seon hurried home. That evening, Seon realized he hadn't paid for lunch. He sent Jaewon an apologetic text, offering to treat her to lunch next time. The next day, Jaiwan shared her packed lunch with Sean again. After work, Sean invited her to dinner. They chatted about their careers and families. Sean confided that he used to adore children, but his wife was child-free by choice. Much to his parents' distress, Jaiwan urged him to persuade his wife. Recalling how her ex-husband had abandoned her when she couldn't conceive, Sean explained his wife was stubborn, and he'd long since given up on having children. Jaiwan, emboldened by alcohol, urged Sean to cherish his family, even without children. "You still have parents who love you," she said. "Unlike me, an orphan who lost family warmth long ago." Learning of Jaiwan's past, Sean felt deep sympathy. As they drank more, their conversation grew deeper. After dinner, Sean suggested walking home. He knew his drunken state would earn his wife's scolding, and would be banished to the couch for the night. Jaiwan advised Sean to be more accommodating toward Hayami. Sean countered that he'd already given his all in the marriage. No matter how much he yielded, his wife remained unsatisfied. Over time, any man would reach his limit. Noticing Jaiwan's cold hands, Sean bought her a pair of gloves. Jaiwan initially refused the gift and tried to pay. Sean insisted his neck was freezing and needed a scarf, so Jaiwan bought a black scarf and gave it to him. Then Sean couldn't help himself, he pulled Jaiwan close and kissed her. Both were drunk and unaware of what they were doing. Jaiwan only sobered up after sleeping in the car. When she woke, she saw Sean standing outside, shivering from the cold. Jaiwan initially wanted him to warm up in the car, but then Sean's adorable reaction made her laugh. Worried he'd catch a cold from waiting too long outside, Jaiwan invited him inside for hot water. Back home, she offered to make him porridge. Her nimble hands soon served steaming food. Before eating, she reminded him to stir it well. Sean took a bite and couldn't help but praise Jaiwan's excellent cooking. After finishing the porridge, Jaiwan went to fry him a sunny-side-up egg. Seeing such a devoted Jaiwan instantly warmed Sean's heart. He couldn't help but recall his wife's cold attitude when he was drunk. Because he suddenly craved a sunny-side-up egg, he asked Hayami to prepare it for him. This stark contrast reminded Sean of his father's words. His parents' affection had always been something Sean envied. He admired women like his mother, dutiful and capable of preparing delicious meals for their families. He himself worked diligently to provide his wife with a happy life. But Hayami, being a career-driven woman, naturally couldn't fulfill this wish. Jaiwan had no memory of the drunken incident. Sean kept their kiss a secret, attributing his own impulsiveness solely to the alcohol. After the hearty meal, Sean found himself reluctant to bid Jaiwan farewell and return home. Lying in bed, Sean kept revisiting the intimate moments with Jaiwan. He began losing his former patience with his wife beside him. He even grew annoyed when her head pressed against his arm, snatching his hand away. This time, the connection stirred more than just Sean's heart. Jaiwan, too, slowly developed different feelings for him, but he had a wife, and there was a 10-year age gap. Jaiwan could only constantly remind herself not to get her hopes up. The cold he endured yesterday finally made Sean sick. Hayami, seeing him cough incessantly, showed no concern. Instead, she covered her nose, worried he might infect her, so she banished her sick husband to sleep on the sofa. Stricken with a severe cold, Sean asked his mother for the recipe for ginger tea. Hayami, staying in their room, overheard their conversation and grew furious. She stormed out, demanding why he had to make such a small matter public knowledge. Unwilling to explain, Sean simply waved her off, urging her to sleep. But before leaving, Hayami berated him once more. Her attitude left Sean deeply hurt. Feeling utterly miserable, he had to get up and brew himself a cup of ginger tea. In that moment, he suddenly recalled Jaiwan pouring him burdock tea. The stark contrast made Sean acutely aware of Jaiwan's kindness and how deeply it drew him in. He often invited Jaiwan out for meals under the guise of friendship. The pleasant atmosphere left both feeling content, for Sean's heart had already made room for another woman. His feelings for his wife began to fade. When Hayami used his hand as a pillow, he expressed discomfort. In that instant, Hayami erupted in anger. She shook her husband awake furiously, demanding answers. For the next week, she sulked and quarreled with Sean, even hurling sarcastic insults and verbal abuse at him. Seeing his wife's vicious demeanor, Sean was so enraged he pounded his chest. That same day, he sought out Jaiwan to pour out his grievances. After all, they had once made a promise: if either faced troubles, they could confide in each other. For all relationships eventually faced the possibility of breaking apart. They continued living in this state for a long time, until the day they slowly grew old together. After learning the true reason behind Sean and his wife's quarrel, Jaiwan advised Sean to be more tolerant of his wife. It's perfectly normal for women to have little mood swings, especially when they're being extra willful in front of their loved ones. A sincere apology would surely win his wife's forgiveness. So Jaiwan helped Sean strategize how to appease Hayami. That day, Hayami's mother-in-law called her, specifically reminding her that her father-in-law's birthday was the day after tomorrow and hoping she'd come home for dinner. Hayami didn't refuse and readily agreed. In truth, she already had plans to play golf with friends that day. To avoid her mother-in-law's invitation, Hayami arranged for her husband to meet her at a foot massage parlor. She explained she wouldn't be able to accompany his father for his birthday. Sean grew angry at his wife's approach. Just as he was about to confront her, Jaiwan's words suddenly came to mind. Since it was his father's birthday, Sean felt at a loss. Hayami then offered a solution. She'd arrange for him to play golf with an important client. She emphasized it was a mandatory couples outing that couldn't be cancelled. She believed this explanation would naturally satisfy her parents. Seeing his wife had everything planned, Sean remained silent. After all, this was typical of Hayami. While her son and daughter-in-law were preparing to celebrate her husband's birthday, the mother bustled about the kitchen, meticulously preparing a lavish feast. But Sean's single phone call instantly broke his mother's heart. Hearing her disappointed tone left Sean feeling awful. What was even harder for him to accept was that Hayami had wasted the food his mother had brought. Hayami didn't think she'd done anything wrong. Instead, she got angry and argued with her husband. Sean sniffed the side dishes and found they didn't smell off, so he shoved all the food back into the refrigerator. Facing such a wife left him deeply uneasy. He couldn't bear to live through another day like this. Feeling down, he went to Jaiwan's apartment building. He found Jaiwan's window dark and closed. Calling her, he learned she'd gone to a seaside hotel. This beach had always been a place Sean longed to visit. That very night, he rushed to meet Jaiwan. Having endured his wife's temperament for years, Sean suddenly contemplated divorce. He poured out all his grievances about his wife to Jaiwan. Jaiwan urged him not to fixate on divorce. When problems arise, one should first seek solutions. Hearing Jaiwan's advice deeply moved Sean. After dinner, they suggested taking a walk by the sea. As the wind grew strong, Jaiwan draped her scarf around Sean's shoulders. Sean realized Jaiwan was the partner he truly sought all his life. This time, he was determined to end things with his wife. Only by severing his marriage to Hayami could he see hope for his future. No matter how Jaiwan pleaded, Sean insisted he must divorce his wife immediately. Jaiwan knew the immense pain a woman faced during divorce. To change his mind, she urged him upstairs, for she herself was a woman abandoned by her husband. Jaiwan urged Sean to stay calm. After all, every married person experiences moments of wanting to divorce, even for the sake of family. He shouldn't act impulsively. To Jaiwan's surprise, Sean seized the moment to confess his feelings. He wanted to resolve matters with his wife before proposing to Jaiwan. Jaiwan immediately stopped Sean, warning him against rash decisions, explaining she wasn't as perfect as he imagined. No matter how Jaiwan described her physical shortcomings, Sean remained determined to return home and divorce his wife. At that moment, Jaiwan called out to him once more. That night, they shared their first intimate moment, yet Sean still hadn't changed his mind, preparing to demand divorce from his wife upon returning home. But fate intervened. Hayami's father was diagnosed with cancer. Seeing his tearful wife, Sean couldn't bring himself to speak. He had no choice but to postpone the divorce talk. This matter dragged on for over a month. To Jaiwan's surprise, she discovered she was pregnant. Longing for a child, she burst into tears of joy. But Jaiwan refused to build her happiness on someone else's pain, so she deleted Sean's number and cut off all contact. By then, Sean had already fallen deeply in love with Jaiwan. Unable to reach his beloved, he lost focus at work. The next day, he rushed to Jaiwan's home, but no matter how many times he rang the doorbell, there was no response. Just as Sean was about to leave in disappointment, Jaiwan happened to return. Sean hurriedly explained why he hadn't gone through with the divorce, but Jaiwan urged him not to proceed and revealed her pregnancy. Sean could scarcely believe the news. After 6 years of longing for a child, he was finally going to be a father. Yet Jaiwan explained she only wanted to carry the baby to term safely. After that, they should have no further contact. She didn't want any complications affecting the baby due to other issues. Sean promised he would keep it completely confidential and stay by Jaiwan's side as a responsible father. To confirm the baby's health, Sean specifically took Jaewon to the hospital for a prenatal checkup. Learning the baby was perfectly healthy filled them both with joy. To stay with Jaewon and support her through the pregnancy, Sean secretly bought a spare phone without Hyami knowing, but no matter how well he hid it, his wife eventually discovered the truth. This led to Hyami beating him severely. With the secret now exposed, Sean seized the opportunity to propose divorce. The next day, he shared his decision with his parents. He also revealed Jaewon's pregnancy. Seeing the ultrasound photo, his parents felt both joy and sorrow. They wanted this grandchild yet opposed their son's divorce. After all, it felt like a betrayal of their daughter-in-law. But Sean believed his marriage to Hyami was already irreparably broken. Divorce seemed the only solution. No matter how his parents pleaded, he insisted on ending the marriage. Hyami couldn't accept her husband's betrayal. For the first time, she embraced Seon, desperate to conceive a child. But it was too late. Furious, Hyami turned and slapped her husband across the face. Seon demanded why she always hit him. Hyami accused her husband of being the one at fault. What right did he have to reject her request? Seon once again refused his wife's advances and pushed her away. To make Hyami give up, Seon produced the baby's ultrasound photo. How could Hyami let Seon off so easily? Early the next morning, she took her husband to her in-laws' house. Hyami hoped her father-in-law and mother-in-law would speak up for her. To mask his inner joy, the father-in-law kept criticizing his son's faults. Though they adored their grandson, their son had indeed made a mistake. Now Hyami only wanted her in-laws to explain how they would handle the situation. The father-in-law, unsure how to resolve it, pretended to be ill. Seeing their son's marriage in such turmoil worried the parents deeply. Since the couple's relationship had always been strained, the parents decided to side with Seon and support his divorce. After all, Hyami has a difficult personality and refuses to have children. Since the woman their son loves has given them a grandson, the elderly couple surely knows which is more important. So the couple visited their son's home once more. Their goal was to persuade their daughter-in-law to agree to divorce their son. Hyami decided to stop pursuing her husband's faults, and even finally agreed to have a child with him. Upon hearing this, the parents immediately told Seon to sort out his affairs outside the marriage. If Seon refused to handle it personally, his family would resolve it for him. Seeing his parents' sudden change in attitude left Seon utterly helpless. Today, he had come intending to persuade his parents to agree to the divorce. Instead, he was the one being persuaded. After seeing his in-laws off, Hyami stopped pretending to be pitiful. Truthfully, her reluctance to divorce stemmed not from love. After all, Hyami was the envy of her colleagues at the TV station. Beautiful, talented, and most importantly, married to a wealthy, devoted husband. She refused to let anyone know her marriage was a failure. She planned to wait until he grew old, then slowly torment him. Though Hyami pretended her husband's affairs didn't bother her and continued working normally, the constant pressure finally took a toll on her health. Hyami suddenly coughed up blood, terrifying her colleagues. Upon hearing the news, Seon rushed straight to the hospital. The doctor's diagnosis revealed Hyami had developed a duodenal ulcer. The doctor's words inevitably made Seon feel guilty. He didn't know what to do next. Seon promised to live properly with her from now on. From this day forward, he would never again act presumptuously and pursue Jaewon. Her in-laws grew deeply anxious upon learning Hyami was hospitalized. Feeling guilty toward their daughter-in-law, the elderly couple bought her a designer handbag as compensation. Seon not only visited the hospital daily to tenderly care for Hyami, but even bought matching couple watches for them to wear together. Though Hyami outwardly distanced herself from this man who had changed his heart, seeing Seon's devoted efforts these past days brought her some comfort. The next day, Hyami asked a colleague if childbirth would affect her figure. The colleague assured her that with proper postpartum care, there would be no impact. She also mentioned that having a daughter had actually strengthened her marriage. These words finally gave Hyami the courage to consider having a child. Yet Seon's attitude made her hesitate again. He kept putting off resolving his relationship with Jaewon. Seon explained Jaewon had gone to his brother's home in the countryside, and they'd resolve the child issue after Jaewon returned to Seoul. But Hyami refused to tolerate her husband's heart lingering elsewhere. She had no choice but to seek help from her in-laws. Yet Seon had hidden Jaewon so thoroughly that even his parents didn't know where to begin. Though Seon promised his wife he'd abandon Jaewon and return home, he simply couldn't bear to leave his beloved. Seon could only beg his mother to care for Jaewon in his place. Hearing such an unreasonable request angered his mother. What would his wife think if she knew she was caring for Jaewon? In the end, She couldn't resist her son's desperate pleas. Moved by compassion, she promised to visit Jaiwan and her child every few days. The very next day, Sian introduced Jaiwan to his mother. The mother was utterly shocked the moment she saw Jaiwan. She had assumed her son would choose a young, pretty girl. While Sian was in the restroom, the mother couldn't resist asking Jaiwan her real age. When Jaiwan revealed her age, the mother was stunned beyond belief. She never imagined her son would be attracted to a woman 10 years his senior. In that moment, the mother mentally scolded her son. She strongly disapproved of his relationship with Jaiwan. She even urged Jaiwan to cut ties with her son immediately. Jaiwan explained she only wanted the child she was carrying. Nothing else mattered to her. Sian's mother then offered to give her an apartment as compensation. Jaiwan firmly refused and promised never to contact Sian again. She warned that if Sian pursued her, she would sell the house she currently lived in. Knowing Jaiwan was an orphan, Sian's mother left her phone number, hoping Jaiwan would call if she ever faced hardship. Back home, Jaiwan's mother berated Sian over the phone. Their conversation was overheard by Jaiwan's father. Enraged by the news, he raged at his son, calling him a brainless fool, whose actions had brought shame upon their family. Sian could only urge his father to calm down. The father even began suspecting Jaiwan's pregnancy was fake. Sian rushed straight to Jaiwan's home. He excitedly reminded her to ask for anything she wanted to eat. His mother was an excellent cook who could prepare anything. But before he could finish speaking, Jaiwan told him they needed to break up. For the sake of their family's reputation, they must sever all contact from now on. She had her mother to care for her. Yet Sian refused to give up on their relationship. Without Jaiwan, he couldn't go on living. Jaiwan resolved never to see Sian again. If they continued their relationship, she might face divine retribution. What if that retribution fell upon their child? Jaiwan's words plunged Sian into agony. He couldn't bring himself to forget his beloved or stop seeing her. Jaiwan embraced Sian tenderly, bidding him farewell. Truthfully, she too was reluctant to let go of such a wonderful man, but their relationship was simply not accepted by anyone. Sian's father believed Jaiwan was after his son's money. He instructed his wife to call Jaiwan and demand a meeting. Early the next morning, Sian's parents arrived at Jaiwan's home. The elevator doors opened to reveal Jaiwan standing at the entrance to greet them. Sian's father scrutinized her from head to toe. When Jaiwan politely bowed to him, he unexpectedly returned the gesture. Even the coats they took off upon entering were hung neatly by Jaiwan. In that moment, Sian's father suddenly recalled visiting his daughter-in-law's home. There, coats were simply tossed aside after being taken off. Hayami had never once offered to hang them up. The stark contrast not only made Sian's father secretly praise Jaiwan's refinement, it turned out his son liked Jaiwan far more than he'd imagined. Jaiwan's demeanor also significantly altered Sian's parents' perceptions. After discussing it, they decided to compensate Jaiwan. As for how exactly, they'd figure it out over a meal. When getting into the car, Sian's father even enthusiastically offered his seat. Jaiwan politely declined and took the front seat instead. Sian's mother was utterly speechless seeing her husband's sudden change in attitude. At the dinner table, Sian's father couldn't help asking if Jaiwan had chosen a prenatal name for the baby. Jaiwan explained the child's name was Glenn. This was because Sian had a prenatal dream of holding a large pig by the sea, which inspired them to choose this name. This interaction made Sian's father grow quite fond of Jaiwan's personality. Even his wife, sitting beside him, couldn't help but start murmuring to herself. Back home, Sian's father compared his daughter-in-law to a thorny rose, while likening Jaiwan to a lilac. Though not strikingly beautiful, her fragrance was hard to miss. No wonder his son had fallen for a woman 10 years his senior. The next day, Sian's father approached his daughter-in-law about the child, to urge Hayami and Sian to reconcile. Having met Jaiwan, he saw she wasn't the clingy type. If Sian was willing to return to the family, she shouldn't hold it against her. Once the child was born, the elderly couple, would take care of it. Seeing how her in-laws' hearts had completely shifted toward Jaiwan, Hayami knew this marriage wouldn't last. She immediately thought of cheating to get back at Sian. Meanwhile, Sian prepared a pregnancy gift for Jaiwan. He held his phone, ready to capture this happy moment. Jaiwan flaunted her ring even more ostentatiously, insisting on documenting it. After several failed attempts to conceive, Hayami had completely lost patience. When a man approached her, she didn't refuse, but after their dinner date, he never reached out again. Failing to meet her expectations left Hayami somewhat disappointed. Since entrusting his mother to care for Jaiwan, Sean had no reason left to meet his beloved. He could only learn about Jaiwon's situation through his parents. His father mentioned Jaiwon had recently visited her brother's home in the countryside. Hearing this, Sean could only remind his father to reach out and check on Jaiwon. Jaiwon probably just wanted a quiet place to be. Just then, Hyami returned from her date. Sean saw her and hurriedly hung up the phone. He then coldly greeted his wife. Having long since lost all affection for each other, they now looked at each other with utter disgust. Prompted by his son's words, the father reached out to Jaiwon. Learning she had returned from the countryside, he invited her to dinner that evening. At the table, Seon's father shared how much his son missed her. He even asked Jaiwon what she wanted to eat, listing dishes by name. His wife was an excellent cook, preparing delicious meals daily. Jaiwon was deeply touched by the elderly man's constant concern. She proactively served food to Seon's father. Throughout the meal, both felt genuinely happy. Seon's father then asked Jaiwon how to resolve the Cold War between husband and wife. Recently, he had sent 2 packages to his first love. He claimed the gifts were sent as a friend. After his wife found out, she began ignoring him, no matter how he explained. It didn't work. Jaiwon felt Seon's father's actions were indeed a bit excessive. Merely explaining wouldn't earn his wife's forgiveness. Only by sincerely kneeling before his mother-in-law to apologize could she see his remorse. Jaiwon urged the elderly man to practice empathy. What if his mother-in-law had been secretly sending gifts to her first love? Seon's father thought it through and realized Jaiwon's point was valid. He rushed home immediately to apologize to his wife. But upon entering their room, he found her gone. Her phone was turned off. In that moment, the old man panicked completely, leading to a night of wild speculation. He even wondered if his wife had stormed off to become a nun at a temple. Such thoughts instantly plunged Seon's father into insomnia. In reality, after spending the day out, Seon's mother had come to Jaiwon's house. Seeing her swollen belly, she was filled with surprise and joy. She suggested accompanying Jaiwon to her next prenatal checkup at the hospital. She quietly shared Jaiwon's situation with Seon, hoping to ease his worries about their well-being. Meanwhile, Seon's father received a call from Jaiwon, who informed him his mother-in-law was staying at her place. Upon hearing this, Seon's father's eyes lit up, and he immediately rushed over. Arriving at Jaiwon's home, he knelt before his wife, sincerely pledging to stay kneeling until she forgave him. He repeatedly confessed the magnitude of his past mistakes, vowing to be devoted only to his wife from now on. Jaiwon's suggestion finally brought the couple back together. Their adorable scene even made Jaiwon, watching nearby, smile. With no one cooking at home, Seon went to a restaurant. While waiting for his meal, he spotted Jaiwon, never expecting the woman he'd been thinking of day and night to be in the same restaurant. Seon immediately walked over to greet her. It had been a month since their last meeting after taking that photo together. Seon's gaze lingered on Jaiwon's slightly rounded belly. Their child was already 3 months along. Since his parents were in the same restaurant, Seon asked the waiter to bring his food to the private room. After work, Hyami also arrived at the same restaurant. Since the owner knew the couple, he reserved a private room for them. The moment Hyami pushed open the door, everyone was stunned. Without a word, she began scolding Jaiwon. Her father-in-law thought Hyami's loud outburst was extremely rude. Hearing this only made Hyami more agitated. After all, if word got out, it would only bring shame to her in-laws. Seon, worried about Jaiwon's pregnancy, tried to take her out. Hyami stopped him. Seeing this, the mother-in-law quickly urged Jaiwon to sit down. Hyami, seeing the entire family defending her, felt resentment welling up inside. She grabbed a plate from the table and smashed it on the floor. Then she picked up the shards, preparing to stab Jaiwon with them. Fortunately, the father-in-law intervened in time, snatching the broken bowl from her hand. Everyone was utterly terrified at that moment. Seon regained his composure and helped his wife sit down. Once the commotion subsided, the mother-in-law quickly explained the situation. Since their son had entrusted Jaiwon to their care, today they had merely taken her to the hospital for a prenatal checkup. Seon had coincidentally encountered them at the restaurant and joined them for a meal. Seon's father rang the bell to summon the waitstaff. The server then entered carrying the pork ribs meal Seon had ordered. With the misunderstanding cleared, the mother-in-law prepared to leave with Jaiwon. But Hyami wasn't about to let her off so easily, so she deliberately humiliated Jaiwon in front of her husband. She even demanded all 3 stay to clarify things face to face. Fearing his daughter-in-law's fiery temper, the father-in-law could only send them back to their room to resolve it. Discussing such matters privately would preserve everyone's dignity. The elders worried Jaiwan might feel pressured and urged her to relax. The mother-in-law even spent the entire car ride soothing Jaiwan's emotions. Back home, Hyami interrogated Jaiwan like a criminal. Seon, unwilling to see his beloved humiliated by his wife, took the blame upon himself, but Hyami kept her husband silent throughout. She demanded Jaiwan explain how they met. Jaiwan truthfully recounted her encounter with Seon. Then Hyami spotted the ring on Jaiwan's finger. She immediately asked her mother-in-law if she'd given it as a gift. Seon stood up and admitted he'd bought it, explaining it was a parting gift for Jaiwan. Hearing this only infuriated Hyami further. After all, no one would choose to give such a thing during a breakup. To her, it was clearly an engagement ring. The mother-in-law desperately tried to defend her son. Seon then formally proposed divorce to Hyami again, since he knew his feelings were no longer with her. There was no point in continuing to live together and torment each other. Hearing this, Hyami immediately resorted to domestic violence against Seon. Jaiwan angrily accused Hyami of being unworthy of being a wife. No wonder Seon was tempted by other women. Seon had often confided in her about the misery of his marriage. You resort to violence whenever things go wrong. Consumed by rage, Hyami beat her husband again. She unleashed every ounce of pent-up resentment. Her father-in-law intervened. Unable to watch any longer, the mother-in-law berated her daughter-in-law for constantly resorting to violence against Seon. Jaiwan didn't want Seon harmed because of her existence, so she took full responsibility upon herself. She explained that she had been abandoned by her husband because she couldn't conceive. To verify her infertility, she deliberately approached Seon, intending to use him as a test subject. Miraculously, she succeeded in conceiving. All she ever needed was a child. She would move away from this city as soon as possible. After revealing her purpose, Jaiwan rose and hurriedly fled this place of turmoil. Once the three had left, Hyami began to taunt her husband with cold sarcasm. Unable to accept being forever cut off from the one he loved, he retreated into the bathroom, numbly drowning his anguish. This incident forced Seon to endure his wife's daily humiliation. As the one at fault, he could only silently bear the torment. Hyami remained convinced her husband had fallen into Jaiwan's trap. She resolved to give him a chance to redeem himself. Though Hyami pretended to forgive him and went out on a date, an uneasy feeling gnawed at her heart, prompting her to cancel the plans last minute. Seon was puzzled but didn't press for an explanation. Only when they met her parents did Hyami reveal her true intent. She directly requested Seon's consent for divorce. The family was stunned by this decision, utterly baffled by their daughter-in-law's sudden change of heart. Hyami explained that while at the movie theater, she saw a pregnant woman walk by. Seon unconsciously turned his gaze toward her. Hyami felt her husband's expression look deeply sorrowful at that moment. Now Jaiwan needed Seon's care more than ever. By choosing divorce, she would allow Seon to stand by Jaiwan's side with dignity. Her father-in-law found Hyami's reason for divorce unconvincing, yet seeing his daughter-in-law's resolute stance, he could only support her decision. As compensation, the in-laws offered to give Hyami their marital home outright, but Hyami had already grown dissatisfied with their current residence. She declared she wanted the villa in Cheongdam-dong. Her father-in-law, believing his son was at fault, agreed to her request. Seon naturally disliked this idea. After all, the Cheongdam-dong villa was extremely expensive. Regardless, her in-laws ultimately accepted Hyami's terms. Her father, however, was pleased his son could end the marriage. He considered giving up a house insignificant. At least Seon could escape such a dreadful wife a blessing. Hyami informed her mother about the impending divorce first, so her mother could brace herself for the news broadcast on TV. The reason Hyami agreed to divorce her husband was because a recent medical checkup revealed her uterus was malformed and she could no longer bear children, having lost her fertility. Hyami decided to initiate the divorce before her in-laws found out. That way, she could play the victim and secure a settlement. After the divorce, Seon couldn't wait to leave Jaiwan's home. He wanted to rush this good news to the one he loved. Faced with Seon's arrival, Jaiwan was too frightened to open the door. After all, she had to honor her promise to Hyami to cut off all contact, so she only pressed the intercom to ask why Seon had come. Only after learning Seon was about to divorce did Jaiwan open the door. The moment Seon stepped inside, he excitedly embraced Jaiwan. Seon's parents also rushed to Jaiwan's home to share the good news. Now the entire family would be by Jaiwan's side awaiting the child's birth. Overcome with emotion, Sian's father couldn't help but praise Hayami for being so sensible this time. She had handled the situation with remarkable decisiveness. Therefore, the elderly couple hoped Jaewon would marry their son as soon as possible. To help Jaewon move into Sian's home as soon as possible, the family decided to replace all the furniture in the house. After finalizing her divorce, Hayami immediately set out to find her next happiness. She had actually had her eye on Minister Soo from the company for quite some time. This time, she arranged to meet him specifically to reveal her single status. Minister Soo felt deeply sympathetic toward Hayami's situation and reassured her that she would surely find someone more suitable. At that moment, Hayami felt profoundly disappointed. It turned out Minister Soo had no romantic interest in her at all, but the strong-willed Hayami wasn't about to give up so easily. Since his divorce, Sian had been living happily every day to move in with Jaewon as soon as possible. He visited her home daily to help pack her belongings. After working all night, Sian suggested staying over that evening, believing his presence would give their baby a sense of security. Jaewon, feeling awkward, pushed him away. Sian realized he hadn't brought pajamas, so he suggested borrowing one of Jaewon's maternity dresses for the night. Jaewon searched for a while before finally pulling out a floral skirt. Sian's adorable expression instantly made Jaewon laugh. Indeed, when two people in love are together, even the air feels sweet. To prove his presence as the baby's father, Sian even sang a lullaby to the little one in her belly. How blissful it is for two people who adore children to have one of their own. Meanwhile, Hayami, desperate to prove she was the victim in her marriage, hastily convened an emergency press conference. She revealed to everyone that she'd been forced into divorce. Journalists immediately pressed her for the reason behind the split. Hayami claimed a third party had intervened. When asked if the man had provided her with alimony, she casually remarked it was given as requested, refusing to disclose her husband's girlfriend's identity. Hayami justified it as protecting the other woman's privacy. Watching the woman tearfully recount her marital misfortune, everyone felt Hayami was a kind-hearted person. This incident utterly destroyed Sian's reputation, turning him into a despised scoundrel. Soon, his parents received calls from relatives and friends. Each friend called solely to condemn Sian's wrongdoing. His parents tried desperately to defend their son, but their explanations fell on deaf ears. Sian's ruined reputation left the entire family frantic. Only then did they realize Jaewon was the true villain. Just days prior, she had cheerfully joined them for a farewell dinner, explaining she couldn't be their son's wife or even their daughter. Sian's father felt Hayami's heartlessness was infuriating, yet Hayami called him then to apologize, explaining today's reports were all journalist misunderstandings. Her point was that her emotions had been sensationalized, so she asked her father-in-law not to worry too much. This kind of news would be forgotten soon enough. Her father-in-law couldn't be bothered to exchange more empty words with Hayami. He believed his former daughter-in-law was a cunning and treacherous villain. After fobbing off her father-in-law, Hayami happily shared the good news with her mother abroad. She believed this media attention had brought her both fame and fortune. Therefore, she hoped her parents could find time to return to Korea. The luxurious villa she now lived in was absolutely perfect to care for the pregnant Jaewon. Sian's parents decided to move into their son's home temporarily. Thus, family walks after dinner became their daily routine. This was precisely the lifestyle Sian had always longed for. Their blissful days continued like this until the 5th month, as the couple's baby was about to arrive. Sian planned to hold their wedding after Jaewon gave birth. Then, when the couple took their wedding photos, they could include the baby. How happy the picture of the family of 5 would be. Before long, Jaewon finally went into labor. The due date arriving a week early left her in-laws flustered. They even nearly forgot the hospital bag at home. Sian rushed back home upon seeing his wife's labor pains begin. Overwhelmed by emotion, Jaewon's father began experiencing muscle cramps. It seemed he wouldn't be able to accompany his daughter-in-law to the hospital for the birth. He reminded his son to drive safely and to inform his parents immediately of any developments. The entire family now awaited the baby's arrival. Though childbirth was arduous, Jaewon felt profoundly happy at that moment. After all, the baby she'd longed for was finally about to meet everyone. Before entering the operating room, she asked Sian to wait outside for good news, but Sian desperately wanted to stay and accompany her through childbirth. To ensure the mother's safety, the doctor insisted family members wait outside. Reluctantly, Sian prepared to leave the ward. He knew childbirth was like passing through the gates of hell. He couldn't shake his worry for Jaewon inside the delivery room, yet that final glance between them would become their last farewell. Thanks to Jaiwan and the doctor's efforts, the baby was born quickly. Sean heard the infant's cry outside the door and felt immense relief. Just then, Jaiwan's father called to inquire about the situation. Sean shared the joyful news that the baby had arrived. Both parents were overjoyed upon hearing the news. Jaiwan's father, especially moved, called her brother to offer congratulations and assured him he would take good care of Jaiwan, asking him to rest easy. The doctor congratulated the mother on the birth of a baby boy. Jaiwan gazed at her adorable child and was moved to tears. Becoming a mother brought such profound happiness. Just as the doctor prepared to help the baby take its first breastfeed, Hyami suddenly suffered a complication. The doctor, needing to rush Jaiwan for emergency treatment, tried to take the baby away, but Jaiwan knew this was their last moment together. Even facing death, she refused to let go of her child. She held her child tightly until her last breath. By the time the doctor took the baby to perform emergency resuscitation on Jaiwan, it was already too late. Unaware of the tragedy, the family sat outside the delivery room awaiting good news. The moment the doctor emerged, Sean immediately asked, "Is it a boy or a girl?" Seon's mother, worried about Jaiwan, inquired about her condition. The doctor replied that Jaiwan had passed away due to a sudden complication. The family stood frozen, unable to process the news. How could someone so vibrant last night be gone so suddenly? Unable to believe it, Seon stormed into the delivery room. The moment he lifted the white sheet, his world shattered. Unable to accept this reality, Seon demanded the doctors resuscitate Hyami, but the doctors explained they had done everything possible. Amniotic fluid embolism was simply irreversible. Seon cried out Jaiwan's name over and over in agony. He even clung to the hope that his wife was merely asleep. The doctors present couldn't hold back tears of sorrow at the sight. No one wanted this to be real. Upon learning of his daughter-in-law's death, the father-in-law collapsed on the spot. Even after regaining consciousness, he refused to accept the truth. Only when they arrived at the delivery room did he finally confront the reality. Jaiwan's passing plunged the entire family into profound grief. Their son had enjoyed only 5 short months of married bliss before heaven cruelly took their daughter-in-law. This should have been a time of joy, welcoming their precious newborn. Instead, the family wept uncontrollably at the sight of the baby. Who could have imagined that the arrival of a new life would cost a mother's? Now, the elderly couple's deepest sorrow is for their grandson. How pitiful must he be, born only to lose his mother? Seon's father stated that though the child would lose his loving mother, his grandparents would become his pillars of support. Yet a child's growth inevitably requires a mother's presence, and Seon would need a wife for the latter half of his life. Seon's father believed Hyami was the perfect choice to be the child's mother, but his wife countered that he still didn't understand women. With Hyami's current circumstances so favorable, how could she possibly agree to reunite with Seon? Besides, she must feel this is karma. After all, Jaiwan was the one who made her cry every day, and Seon and his ex-wife had long since lost all affection for each other. Just then, Seon's mother's phone suddenly rang. Hyami asked if something had happened in their family. She'd heard from a friend that Seon was seen at the funeral home. She even wondered if something had happened to her father-in-law. Seon's mother couldn't bring herself to speak and remained silent for a long time. Seon's father snatched the phone and told Hyami the truth. Hyami was utterly shocked by the news. When she inquired about the child's condition, thankfully, he was perfectly healthy. Upon learning of Jaiwan's passing, Hyami immediately reached out to Seon, but Seon wasn't in the mood to take her call. Hyami decided to visit Seon in person, hoping to see if her ex-husband needed any help, but Seon declined Hyami's offer, thanking her politely. Jaiwan's passing had also dissolved Hyami's resentment toward her. She now focused solely on pursuing her own future happiness. Successfully winning Minister Su's heart was Hyami's new goal. So early that morning, she called Minister Su to request a tour of his home. Minister Su didn't refuse and readily agreed. That same day, Hyami bought flowers and arrived at Minister Su's residence. She was filled with anticipation about what might unfold during this private time with the man she admired. Disappointingly, however, a maid was present in the house. Throughout the visit, Minister Su barely engaged with Hyami. Hyami had planned to spend a romantic dinner with Minister Su that evening. In the end, nothing progressed, and she was forced to leave. Unbeknownst to her, Minister Su was actually pursuing her superior. Moreover, Their relationship had undergone a subtle shift. Hayami froze in awkwardness when she witnessed Minister Su confessing to In-suk. The man she adored was actually interested in an older woman, yet she felt compelled to offer insincere congratulations. Determined to win Minister Su over, Hayami began treating him to meals. Unexpectedly, a colleague beat her to the punch. It dawned on her, she'd always been the fool among these friends. The next day, Hayami confronted In-suk at the office. Everyone knew she'd always had feelings for Minister Su. Why did In-suk have to choose to compete with her for the same man? If they'd been upfront about their relationship from the start, she wouldn't have been humiliated in front of everyone. In-suk hadn't expected Minister Su to confess to her suddenly either. Last night's events were completely unforeseen, but Hayami felt In-suk had been waiting to see her fail. She angrily laid into In-suk for her wrongdoing, but seeing her man prefer someone else, Hayami could only give up the fight and wish them well. Feeling gloomy, she drowned her sorrows in alcohol. Before she knew it, she'd drunk herself into a stupor. Drunk Hayami began reminiscing about her time with her ex-husband. Back then, Seiun had been so attentive and caring toward her. In a daze, Hayami found herself at her ex-husband's home. She barged in under the pretense of wanting to see the child. She argued the baby was too pitiful without its mother, pleading to be allowed a glimpse into the nursery. Seiyun's parents, fearing they'd wake the infant, quickly ushered Hayami out. Hayami declared she'd return and asked if she could buy anything for the baby. Seiyun's father responded that the child needed formula and diapers. Hayami promised to bring these items after she sobered up the next day, and asked her in-laws to prepare dinner for the baby tomorrow, even inquiring if Seiyun had any preferences. But Seiyun barely acknowledged her throughout the conversation. Seiyun's parents quickly explained their son was in a bad mood. After all the commotion, Hayami suggested leaving. Seiyun's father, however, felt Hayami had been more considerate than expected this time. Coming to see the baby late at night showed she truly cared. She would make an excellent mother for their grandson. But Seiyun's mother thought her husband was being unrealistic. Hayami's visit might just be a passing whim. The next day, Hayami arrived at her in-laws' home to see the baby. Seeing this, Seiyun's father seized the opportunity to urge her to remarry Seiyun. If she could accept Seiyun again, her later years would be filled with happiness. Seiyun's mother clarified they weren't forcing her, they merely wanted to offer sound advice for her consideration. Hayami explained her frequent visits to see the child stemmed from pity for the baby growing up without a mother. She and Seiyun had no reason to continue entangling themselves. She even sarcastically advised her in-laws to practice more kindness and virtue in daily life. Then, when the time came, heaven would arrange a better daughter-in-law for them. Someone like herself had no place continuing to plague their precious son. Hayami grabbed her clothes and hurried out. But at the door, she bumped into her ex-husband driving home. When they faced each other, Seiyun completely ignored her existence. In that moment, Hayami felt profound irony. How foolish of her to have briefly considered reconciling with her ex. What use was a man who was just an empty shell? Because the man she loved had been stolen by In-suk, Hayami set her sights on Minister Su's younger brother. Though her uterus was malformed, the doctor hadn't said she was 100% unable to conceive. She had nothing to lose by trying. While Minister Su was more accomplished than his brother, at least Juno was significantly younger. To find a suitable target sooner, Hayami had to first ingratiate herself with her future sister-in-law. Learning Juno was currently single filled Hayami with delight. Unbeknownst to her, Juno's potential partner was right beside her. That day, after buying a folding chair for her ex-husband's child, Hayami was about to take it upstairs to the baby. Suddenly, she recalled Seiyun ignoring her the previous day. In that instant, Hayami abandoned her plan and turned to leave. But this scene was witnessed by her former mother-in-law. Learning Hayami had bought something for the child, she warmly invited her upstairs for tea. Seiyun's mother tried to persuade her former daughter-in-law to stay for dinner. She bustled about in the kitchen preparing the meal. But then, the baby's cries echoed from the room. Guessing it might need a diaper change, Hayami hurried to the child's room. After changing the diaper, she tried to entertain the baby. Strangely, the child kept smiling knowingly toward his side. In that instant, Hayami sensed something was terribly wrong. Seeing Jaiwon's spirit lingering in the baby's room, Hayami was terrified out of her wits. She didn't even drink the tea her mother-in-law had prepared and hurriedly left. Seiyun's parents found their former daughter-in-law's behavior somewhat strange, but Hayami just wanted to get away from this terrifying place as quickly as possible. She was afraid Jaiwon might suddenly follow her. In her panic, she started the car and sped away, unaware of what had just transpired. Siyin's parents rushed to the child's room to check on the situation. Upon entering, they found the baby sleeping peacefully. They didn't know that Jaiwan was there, comforting her child. Just then, Siyin's father's phone suddenly rang. The couple worried the sound might wake the baby, but the infant remained completely undisturbed, sleeping even more soundly. In truth, Jaiwan had remained in this home ever since her passing. Unable to bear parting from her child, she now watched over them in another form. Seeing her husband and mother-in-law weeping over her death, Jaiwan felt helpless to comfort their grief. As a spirit, she could do nothing now, only drifting through the house like invisible air. Ever since seeing Jaiwan in the baby's room, Hayami had been too terrified to sleep each night. The darkened windows always sent an inexplicable chill down her spine. Now Hayami agonized over whether to tell Siyin's parents about this. Would they think she was crazy if she spoke up? But in the end, she mustered her courage and went to her former mother-in-law's house. Upon entering, she immediately asked if there were any calming pills in the house. She feared the elderly woman might not handle the truth she was about to share, but her mother-in-law explained the calming pills were left at the old house. Terrified Jaiwan might appear at any moment, Hayami frantically scanned every corner of the room. After searching thoroughly, she finally relaxed, so she stepped back into the baby's room. Seeing the child sleeping peacefully in the crib, she felt an instant surge of tenderness. Every time she came here, she never saw him fussing, because Jaiwan's shadow was nowhere to be seen in the room. Hayami concluded she must have misperceived the previous encounter and needn't remain overly anxious. Yet she never imagined Jaiwan stood directly behind her. As Hayami finished tending to the baby and prepared to leave, she froze in terror. Her previous sight had not been a hallucination. By the time she regained her senses, it was already too late. Jaiwan had possessed Hayami's body. Her gaze softened in that instant. Jaiwan even used his power to control Siyin's mind. When Siyin saw Hayami again, he actually smiled. Their conversation seemed like that of a normal married couple. His mother was surprised by her son's change. When she learned they had planned to go out for exercise together, she looked even more puzzled. Moreover, Hayami had even taken the initiative to look for food in the refrigerator. She believed eating something before exercise would give them energy for the workout. Seeing Hayami eat so heartily, Siyin suggested he'd join her. His mother was naturally very happy. Ever since Jaiwan left, her son hadn't had much of an appetite. Today, with Hayami by his side, he actually ate several bowls. Watching them eat so heartily, the mother offered to peel some fruit for them. At the table, Siyin brought up the topic of children with Hayami. Their conversation once again made the mother feel a bit strange. After eating their fill, the two decided to go out for exercise. But right at the door, they happened to run into the father-in-law. They learned that the father-in-law had hurt his back because the bed at home was too hard. Hayami suggested taking him to buy a softer mattress, proposing they postpone the exercise plans. The father-in-law was somewhat surprised by his daughter-in-law's initiative. Soon, the three arrived at a furniture store. Seeing his father-in-law pleased with the store's recommended soft mattress, he offered to pay, but Hayami insisted she had always benefited from his kindness and had never done anything for him in return. Back home, the father-in-law excitedly shared the news with his wife. He couldn't believe Hayami had become so gentle and kind, even going out of her way to buy him an expensive bed. The mother-in-law couldn't help but praise Hayami's transformation. The elderly couple truly hoped the two would remarry soon. Siyin then took Hayami out to see a movie. In his eyes, the woman beside him was Jaiwan. From then on, Hayami visited her in-laws daily to see the child. Her parents-in-law were overjoyed to witness this. They never imagined their former daughter-in-law would treat their grandson as her own. Moreover, the baby was always well-behaved whenever Hayami was around, even regarding her as his own mother. Siyin's father advised his wife to be more discreet next time. Whenever they saw Hayami and Siyin alone together at home, the elderly couple would quickly find an excuse to leave. Moreover, Hayami's current disposition made her perfectly suited to be their daughter-in-law. Jaiwan's manipulation had taken hold of Siyin's mind. Unable to go a day without seeing Hayami, he drove over to find her. Seeing this, Hayami mentioned a new sauna had opened nearby and suggested taking Siyin to experience it. It was their first time visiting such a place. Siyin suggested giving Hayami a massage to ease her fatigue. Hayami thoroughly enjoyed Siyin's attentive service. Just as Siyin voiced his desire to reconcile, Jaiwan immediately agreed to the request. She too longed to stay forever by her children and husband's side. Since the two had been out for so long, Jaiwan had already begun missing her children. Seeing this, Seon proposed she stay overnight at their home. At that moment, Jaiwon spotted a roadside stall selling baby goods. Seeing adorable hats and shoes, she wanted to bring some back for the baby. The father was delighted to see his son return from his date with Hyami. Upon learning they decided to remarry, the in-laws were so thrilled they popped champagne to celebrate. The next day, Seon and Hyami held another wedding ceremony, though the groom now bore Hyami's appearance. The woman who truly wished to marry Seon was Jaiwon. However, Hyami's transformation eventually raised suspicions among her in-laws. They even wondered if Jaiwon's spirit had possessed their daughter-in-law. After summoning a master to investigate, they discovered this was indeed the case. Fearing Jaiwon's spirit might harm the family, the father-in-law resolved to find someone to drive her away immediately. But the mother-in-law refused to believe Jaiwon would harm anyone. She simply couldn't bear to leave her newborn child behind. The father-in-law insisted she was merely a spirit. If her wishes weren't fulfilled, she might turn violent. But the mother-in-law couldn't bring herself to drive Jaiwon away. If she left, Hyami would surely revert to her former self. Just then, Hyami suddenly walked in. She asked if the master was truly skilled in feng shui. After all, many so-called masters were charlatans. The father-in-law explained the master came from a temple, so he must be genuine, because the master said the spirit would bring misfortune to the household. After days of deliberation, the elderly couple finally decided to drive Jaiwon out. They believed she might find a better life if she reincarnated. As they stepped out of the room, they saw their daughter-in-law washing their son's feet. This shocking sight left the father-in-law speechless. He approached Seon, demanding why his wife was washing his feet. Hyami explained she wanted to relieve her husband's fatigue, thinking he deserved some pampering after working so hard. The father-in-law stared at his own feet, suddenly overcome with envy. After all, his wife had never served him like this in their entire marriage. Yet the couple's affection finally brought good news. While eating breakfast, Hyami suddenly experienced morning sickness. It was because when the mother-in-law returned home last time, a spirit had followed her. Ever since, it had taken up residence in this house. It turned out the child had come to be reborn. At first, Hyami thought she was just having stomach issues. With her uterine deformity, how could she possibly conceive? So she didn't give it much thought. Ever since the father-in-law saw Hyami wash Seon's feet last time, he couldn't stop dwelling on it. After all, how many women in this day and age would wash their husband's feet? Only Jaiwon's temperament would allow such an act. In that moment, the father-in-law was once again torn. If he invited a master to perform a ritual to drive away Jaiwon's spirit, his son's happiness would be utterly destroyed. The most important thing now was that Seon was living happily with a ghost. How could this situation be resolved? But the father-in-law could only advise his wife to observe for a while longer. Perhaps living like this for a year or two wouldn't cause any major problems. After repeated bouts of vomiting, Hyami finally bought a pregnancy test. Confirming she was pregnant, she shared the joyful news with her in-laws. The elderly couple danced with delight upon hearing the news. They even excitedly told their son, reminding him to bring Hyami flowers when he returned. Because of this, the in-laws decided to drive Jaiwon's spirit away. Now that Hyami had her own child, she wouldn't change her heart. Seon followed his mother's advice and bought his wife a gift. The entire family eagerly anticipated the arrival of this new life. To restore normalcy to his parents and Seon's lives, the father-in-law sought out the master again to intervene. The master insisted the daughter-in-law must remain at home. After returning home, the father-in-law reminded Hyami not to schedule anything for the next day, claiming he had arranged for the master to come bless her and the baby. Without much thought, Hyami readily agreed. The next day, the master arrived to perform his ritual. Jaiwon, possessing Hyami's body, remained unaware her in-laws sought to expel her. After chanting incantations, the master began scattering red beans relentlessly toward Hyami. In that instant, Jaiwon's physical form was fully exposed. In her panic, she was completely expelled from Hyami's body. The talismans the master affixed throughout the house formed an impenetrable barrier Jaiwon couldn't breach. Despite multiple attempts, she remained trapped outside. The baby seemed to sense its mother's departure. Hearing the infant's cries tore at Jaiwon's heart. Unable to return home, she had no choice but to wander. After Hyami's pregnancy, everyone revolved around her. Meals were carefully prepared 3 times a day, all to ensure the daughter-in-law enjoyed food to her liking. Seon personally brought meals to her room, urging his wife to eat. He even offered to feed her by hand. Watching his wife eat so heartily suddenly reminded Seon of Jaiwon. When she was pregnant, he hadn't been there to care for her. After finishing her meal, Hayami reminded Sian to buy a prenatal education book. She planned to arrange her future diet strictly according to its guidelines. She then began preparing for her nightly mouth rinse. But just then, Hayami sensed something was terribly wrong. Looking down, she was utterly stunned. Sian entered the room to find blood everywhere on the floor. He quickly called an ambulance. In the end, they couldn't save their child. Losing the baby caused Hayami's personality to revert to its former self. Whatever her husband did, she criticized him. Sian didn't argue with her, letting her vent her frustration. But Hayami believed her in-laws were responsible for her losing the child. Sian was utterly shocked to hear this. He had no idea his parents had arranged anything. His in-laws were deeply distressed after their daughter-in-law lost the baby. They regretted privately hiring some master. At home, Hayami constantly heard the child's cries. This time, she no longer had the patience she once did for the baby. Her mother-in-law explained the child just wanted someone to hold him, and ordered her daughter-in-law to go lie down and rest. Hayami's impatience didn't escape her mother-in-law's notice. After all, there was a difference when it wasn't her own flesh and blood. Sian tried to cheer his wife up by buying her a designer handbag, but Hayami glanced at it and tossed it aside. Seeing his wife revert to her old self left Sian feeling disappointed. He muttered that he was actually exhausted every day. Hearing this, Hayami immediately flew into a rage. She argued that as a grown man, he had no right to complain about being tired. Sian explained he was just venting, but Hayami kept berating him. At that moment, Sian couldn't take it anymore. He had rearranged his schedule to leave the office early that afternoon. He had run around several malls just to find a gift his wife would like. Anyone else would have accepted it graciously, even if they didn't like it. Sian explained he was also heartbroken about losing their child. He had bought the gift to comfort his wife. Hearing this, Hayami offered a perfunctory apology. This moment pushed Sian over the edge. A fierce argument erupted between him and Hayami. His in-laws, hearing the commotion, rushed out and eavesdropped at the door. Inside, the shouting grew even more intense. Sian accused his wife of unfairly blaming him for the miscarriage. Hayami feared she might never conceive again. Sian's rage boiled over at this. He could only grab the New Year's tie and slam it hard against the wall. Enraged, Hayami slapped Sian across the face. She even packed her bags, determined to leave the house. Fearing his parents' worry, Sian desperately tried to stop her. But no matter how he apologized, he couldn't calm Hayami's emotions. At that moment, Sian had no idea what to do with her. Her in-laws immediately intercepted her when they saw her with her bags. Hayami declared she feared Sian might suddenly strike her. Hearing this, the mother-in-law quickly summoned her son. She confronted him, demanding why he would want to hit his own wife. When Sian denied it, Hayami erupted in anger. She insisted his actions throwing the tie clearly showed he intended to hit her. Sian explained he'd thrown the tie against the wall because he'd lost control of his emotions. He apologized to his wife for his own mistake. Seeing this, the father-in-law urged his daughter-in-law to forgive Sian's actions. He then took his son aside to talk to him. His aim was for Sian to practice greater patience with his wife. No marriage sails smoothly without storms. Yet after resolving the marital conflict, the father-in-law discovered Hayami had fainted in the living room. In panic, he urgently called an ambulance to transport his daughter-in-law to the hospital. Now the in-laws deeply regret driving away Jaiwon's spirit back then. They blame themselves for the chaos now engulfing Sian's life. After regaining consciousness, Hayami suffered no serious physical harm. Only a persistent, piercing headache tormented her. Hayami knew she owed her luck to her in-laws stopping her from leaving. Had she driven out that day, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Her mother-in-law urged her daughter-in-law to practice more patience in daily life. Listening to elders' advice was never a mistake. After being expelled from her in-laws' home, Jaiwon not only freeloaded off her two best friends from her past life, but also wandered aimlessly through shopping malls after eating her fill. By chance, she spotted Hayami's boss in a restaurant. Since Jaiwon had been this man's Chinese tutor in life, the homeless spirit followed her student home. Yet she unexpectedly encountered two underworld messengers there. Jaiwon initially thought they'd come to take her away from the mortal world. After questioning them, she realized it was all a misunderstanding. Jaiwon asked which member of the household they intended to take. The underworld messengers replied that heavenly secrets couldn't be revealed, only stating the deceased had 1 month left. From then on, the two messengers guarded the house daily, while Jaiwon followed her student around constantly, because the messengers were going to take someone from this household. At that moment, Jaiwan hoped it would be the man beside her. Then she could wander alone in solitude. But seeing the uncle's happy expression, she couldn't bear it. After speaking, Jaiwan drifted off to who knows where. Hyami's entire head ached unbearably, so her husband had her undergo a full-body examination. Yet the tests showed her blood vessels were perfectly healthy. The headache might stem from psychosomatic issues. This required the patient to adjust her mental state herself, to help his daughter-in-law recover quickly. Her father-in-law reassured Hyami, "Your body is strong. What you need now is to relax and rest well." Hyami's former arrogance had faded. In the hospital, she even began missing her child. Her father-in-law promised she could see the child daily after discharge. Sian just matures later. Give him time. He'll become a perfect husband. Hyami now recognized her own mistakes. She felt Jaiwan must be an exceptionally gentle woman. Otherwise, Sian wouldn't have fallen so deeply in love with her. Her father-in-law comforted her, saying she herself was also a very gentle woman. Then he told Sian to just accept that he wasn't meant to have a wife. No one can have everything in life. From now on, focus all your energy on the child. Bear with it, a lifetime passes quickly. After all, in any marriage, someone has to be the first to yield. Hyami's persistent headaches remained incurable. Her father-in-law speculated this might be a sign of becoming a spirit medium. Such conditions often defy medical diagnosis, but her mother-in-law dismissed this possibility. Doctors had confirmed her illness stemmed from psychological stress. Just then, Hyami returned from a trip only to find a child sitting on the sofa. And so the story ended abruptly, leaving everything unresolved.